On a computer, you can't do that on a computer. No.
You need to ring it, not. You know.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Tuesday Table Talks. We are your hosts, Pastor Sherman Bradley,
Pastor Sadell Bradley.
and we are excited to be here with our wonderful friend and guest, Officer Louis Arnold of the Cincinnati Police Department. Welcome, Officer Arnold.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. There's so much going on in the nation as it relates to law enforcement, even right here in our own backyard. Before we get into some of those particulars, it'd be great for you to share with us, because you have a unique story as an officer, at least in my opinion. So it'd be great then to hear just how this became a second career for you, not your first career. And you took a little longer than many have and still accomplished this wonderful feat. So tell us a little bit about how you became Cincinnati police officer.
Well, when I was young, I always wanted to be a police officer. I had an uncle that was a police officer in Cincinnati. And but as I got older, I had some negative experiences with police officers. When I was in elementary school, I witnessed an event that was traumatic to me. Then as a teenager, during the 60s, during the riots here in Cincinnati, I witnessed some more things that were traumatic to me. And I just really, uh, I became very angry, and I had a hatred for police, and I didn't want to have anything to do with police officers. And as it would happen, my son becomes a cop, and so in meeting his friends and talking to them, I decided to go through the Citizens Police Academy, which gave me even more background about policing in Cincinnati. And 2000, I was a contractor, residential contractor. 2007 is actually when work slowed down for me. Had a conversation with my son about rekindling that desire to be a police officer again, and talked it over with my wife and made a decision to go into the academy, Cincinnati Police Academy. Took 13 months to get into the academy. So when I got into the academy, I was 55 years of age. And the rest is history. God really took me through it. The academy, I would not have made it had there been encouragement through him from other people. Many mornings I would wake up during the academy and say, "What am I doing?" Sit on the side of the bed and say, "What am I doing?" Running 5, 6, 8 miles a day. And then on top of the academic piece, and I hadn't been in an academic setting in about 30 years. So in the beginning, it was a struggle, but I prayed and I said, "God," I said, be the student in me." And he gave me a strategy on how to study. And I used that strategy and did well throughout the rest of the academy. And I've been on the department 12 years. My son was on 18 years, and he retired to go into ministry. But we were on the department together for about 10 years, and that was exciting also. Even have a photo of he and I in uniform, so that's pretty exciting. So that's kind of an abbreviated story of how I got to where I'm at, and I'm still happy to be there.
Well, we have a lot that's going on around the country and in Cincinnati, having to do with violence in the streets, violence with police, and we have a lot of questions that have been asked from some people out here. In terms of the situation that we're seeing with Mr. Baker in Wisconsin, can you give us any of your thoughts about that? I know that we're in Cincinnati and we're not in Wisconsin, so there are probably some differences there. But can you just give me your initial thoughts about that situation?
Jacob Blake, I would say, oftentimes we as cops, we'll say we don't want to be Monday night quarterbacks or armchair quarterbacks when it comes to police situation, but some things are undeniable, and that was a horrible incident, in my opinion, as a police officer and the training that we received. It was handled totally wrong by those officers. I did not see Mr. Blake with a weapon, and it's been said that there was not a weapon in the vehicle, and he did not have a weapon. And to have your gun drawn was the ultimate point of a deadly force. Is when you pull your weapon, it means that you, as an officer, you feel your life is in jeopardy. And when a man is walking away from you, trying to get in his vehicle, and you grab him from by his t-shirt, trying to pull him back out of the vehicle, and simultaneously pull the trigger on your weapon, because guns just don't go off. You have to pull the trigger and shoot him 7 times in the back. There was no justification at all for that. There's a lot of other things that probably could have been done. I don't know if they carry tasers in Wisconsin. I'm not sure. But even if you don't have a taser, you probably have a baton, collapsible baton. You might have mace. There's some other tools that you can use on your belt. When you pull that weapon, you plan on taking a life. And so that there needs to be some other options in place before you decide to do that. So in my opinion, it was attempted murder, in my opinion. You shoot someone 7 times in the back, pulling away from you. He's not a threat to you, and yet instead you're still shooting. And that's how I see it. Some folks may disagree, but that's how I saw it. You know, it has to come a time where we start calling these things what they are. And I think George Floyd, it kind of swung that pendulum, where you even had police chiefs coming out calling George Floyd's murder. And this was attempted murder. And I believe you're going to get the same response with Mr. Blake.
So is there a standardized rule or a rule of engagement that police officers are taught in the state or across the country? Because, you know, we're kind of, like you said, armchair quarterbacks. We're looking at something, we haven't seen the entire incident, and we're looking at what we think the rules are, and we're thinking that they're being violated. Is there a standardized way that police are supposed to be handling these kinds of conflicts?
Well, what we're taught in Cincinnati, and I can only speak for Cincinnati, whatever the level of confrontation is, we go up 1. So say someone is combative physically with their fist, we'll go up 1 and we may pull our mace or baton out. Now, if someone has a knife, then we have to go, because a knife is a deadly weapon. So many people say, well, he only had a knife. Knives have killed a lot of people. So we go to the next step up, which would be our weapon. And so you have to, that's sort of the matrix that we use here in Cincinnati. And I would say we've had shootings recently within the last few years, and they've all been found to be justified. Here's the other thing that we've learned. You get out in front of it. You get in front of the media within 24 hours, and you give the citizens some information. It may not be all of the information because of the ongoing investigation, but you have to give the citizens something to let the citizens know that you're working on it and trying to get the truth out of it, and then present that to the citizens. And oftentimes they'll hold back on. I don't know if they released information yet in Wisconsin. And what that does is, go ahead, Sadell.
Go ahead, keep going.
Now, what I was going to say, what that does is now it gives people an opportunity to write their own narratives in their own mind. And then that's where you get the protesting and the destruction and the rioting and the unrest, where if you get out in front of it and give the people the truth, as much of the truth as you can give them, that really helps a lot.
What causes something like the Breonna Taylor situation, where something has clearly been done and there is no seeming repercussions for such a long time? What causes that?
Well, I can't speak for Louisville again, but I will say that police unions are pretty powerful, and oftentimes they can slow the process, or they can influence it to the favor of the officer. That situation in Louisville was horrible, in my opinion. They had the wrong house. It's been said over and over again that they had the wrong house, and the person they were looking for was already in custody. So there's a breakdown of communication somewhere. And the fact that her boyfriend open fire when they broke into the house. If someone broke into my house unannounced, I would open fire. It was with a no knock search warrant,
Yeah.
and they use them. They're legal, but that one ended very tragically, and she should not have lost her life.
Is that qualified immunity? Is that what you're talking about?
Pardon me? Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Because you're a cop.
Can you explain that qualified immunity?
Well, because of as police officers, we have to make decisions, and oftentimes they're split-second decisions, and sometimes in those split-second decisions, mistakes can be made. And if we prosecute every police officer that seriously makes a mistake, then we probably won't have police departments. So there has to be something that protects police officers when they do make a mistake. Now, Mr. Blake's shooting was not a mistake. Breonna's shooting was a mistake. And so the question becomes, the citizens want someone held accountable. The question becomes, who do you hold accountable? Because a mistake was made. And just knowing, cops are human beings. And I would say, I don't know what those officers who realize that they killed an innocent person are going through. I don't know, but I guarantee you they're going through something. Police are not heartless. And I guarantee you when they make a mistake like that it haunts them.
Yeah.
I can't speak for all. Some probably, and some it may not. But I would say overall, as a majority, I'm sure it haunts them.
Now, in fairness, though, we have to take this question about qualified immunity back to the 1800s. This started in the late 1800s, before there was what level of justice and the injustice that we face in America today. There was an entirely different system operating back then when this came to be, and it was covering the police in ways that is even far more egregious than how it's covering them today. And it came out of the period of ending the Reconstruction era, where there were such prominent developments in the African-American community and in politics and in government at all levels. So this was an attempt to take back control. And in order to do so, they needed to put legal parameters in place, because at that time, African-Americans were not police officers.
Right.
So this is not for us as we get to benefit from it today with the myriad of ethnic groups that are inside the police department.
Right.
Back then, man, the history of this, and it hasn't been altered for such a long time. I understand and I appreciate the need to have that covering when there is legitimate mishandlings that aren't of an egregious nature. But boy, Breonna's case, you just can't, there's no reason for no-knock warrants at 1 o'clock in the morning. I just find there's got to be other ways around in policing to deal with the issues that we're facing.
Well, here, let me say this to you, Sherman. That was an egregious mistake. It really was. But sometimes you have to have no-knock warrants, because if you have say you have a drug dealer that's dealing some heavy weight, and he has enormous amount of weapons in the home, and you know that there are guns and there's weapons and drugs in the home, there has to be the element of surprise. If you take away the element of surprise, then you really put police and those whose homes are being breached, you put both of their lives in jeopardy. So I see the need for no-knock warrants. I do. And to take the broad brush because of Breonna in Louisville and say that there shouldn't be any, I don't think we can operate that way. That has to be an individual case where there was a ton of breakdown in communication. The fact that the address was wrong, the guy was already in custody. Why hasn't that been communicated to those officers who are getting ready to breach this apartment? So that's why I say that it's more than just those officers that are at fault. And where that investigation is going in Louisville, I don't have a clue, because we don't live in Louisville. I hear there might be a judgment coming out this weekend or next week. But there has to be, you have to have an element of surprise somewhere when you're dealing with some of the things that, in particular, SWAT deals with. Now we do no knock search warrants here, but it has to be something that's huge. We serve a lot of search warrants. Go ahead.
For me as a citizen, even wanting safe streets, I still struggle with the notion with all of the technology that we have and the ability to do surveillances the way that we do and the things that are happening clandestinely as it relates to how technology is used to be able to, one, even if you had the right house, from what I've read about how they shot into the house, it went into the next house. I mean, there was some reckless behavior, even if they had the right house and the right perpetrators on the inside.
And you know who's supposed to deal with that? And you know who's supposed to deal with that? Is that police department. Here's what we're taught here in Cincinnati. Now, as I keep saying, referencing, I can only speak Cincinnati. We're responsible for every round that comes out of our gun.
Right.
Every round. We're taught that from day one. Know your backstop and beyond. That means know what's right behind whatever you're shooting at, and then what's beyond. Are there houses beyond there? Are there cars? Is there a shopping mall? All of those things you have to be thinking about. And so that's how we're trained, Sherman. My thing is, I don't know how Louisville's trained. And that to me, that speaks to having some form of unified training across the nation where all cops are trained the same. We're one of the best trained police departments in the nation, and we still make mistakes. Now, I couldn't imagine a guy going through the academy for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then coming out and being given a gun and a badge and told to serve and protect. I can't imagine what his mindset is like. What tools does he have here? Because everything is about muscle memory. I mean, we go over things like I have the range tomorrow. I don't know how many rounds I will shoot tomorrow. I don't know how many times I would draw my weapon tomorrow, because what I'm doing is training my brain. I don't know how many times I'm going to do that. So muscle memory is huge, and that comes from training, constant training. And if we don't have some conformity or some training that's similar across the nation, I think we're going to continue to have what we're having.
I think some of the things you said earlier are apropos here in terms of the narrative that is communicated to people, because it's almost as if what you're explaining makes perfect sense to me. There was a breakdown in communication in the entire system. The police officers following the information that they've had. They go into a place and it happens to be the wrong place. And now I'm sure, as you said, there may be remorse or contrition or of some sort, or even devastation over having shot someone that's innocent.
Yeah.
And we don't get to really hear any of that remorse. We're hearing nothing.
Well,
and it feels as if we're marching, we're protesting, wherever. We haven't heard anything, even to say we had major, and certainly there's going to be a suit. And certainly there's a simple amount of money that is going to be done, and justifiably so, because of the breakdowns in the entire system. And it would seem to me that if we were communicating to the people, we made all of these egregious mistakes and that caused this loss of life, and here's what we're doing to reform our training in order for those mistakes not to be made again. We are, contrite, we're apologizing, we want to represent and protect and serve. That's what we're here for. All those kinds of statements, but it seems like there's nothing, and it's just like all over and over. So bad for y'all. You out of luck.
So as I say, I can only speak for Cincinnati, and think about it when we have an issue here. Within 24 hours, our chief is on TV, and he's giving you as much information as he can. And he will let you know it's an ongoing investigation, and as more information is released to him, he releases it to the public. Where do we learn that from? We learned that from Timothy Thomas' situation back in 2001. because it took weeks before they would even come out and address the public as to what had happened. And the public waiting around got frustrated and wrote their own narratives, and the city exploded. And that's what cities need to learn. You got to tell Sadell, you're right. You have to tell the people something. You just can't go silent for several months, not telling the people anything. And then you come out with a decision. Now the people are going to be angry, because if it's a decision that if they don't agree with the decision that comes out, then it's a totally different ball game. And that's created oftentimes by silence.
Yeah. And they're not just, no matter what decision they come up with now, because it's taken so long, and it's taken Oprah Winfrey making billboards and all these other kind of things.
Exactly.
You are really exacerbating the community's pain with your silence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, if we come to Cincinnati, generally in the summer, there's an uptick in crime and violence. I don't know if it's the heat or whatever it is. But now across the country in major cities, there is an uptick in violence. And there's been so many shootings over this past month, even just last night. A lady was shot in Avondale. Can you tell us, people are surmising that it's gang violence, it's this and that. Can you tell us what's going on, and if anything, what we can do?
Well, I am not an expert in this area. I can just give you what I know as a PO. You're right. When it gets warmer, there's an uptick in violence. And people oftentimes say, well, do we have gangs in Cincinnati? We have, I call them neighborhood clubs. So you live in Avondale, and it's a group of about 15 of y'all, and y'all give yourselves a name. Or you live in Evanston, or you live in Lincoln Heights. And that's what we have in Cincinnati. We don't have Crips and Bloods and all the other gangs that Chicago and Detroit and New York. We don't have that. In Cleveland, we don't have that here. But what we do have, a lot of our shootings are retaliation. Those shootings that happened last weekend, where 10 people got shot in one location, the people who got shot were innocent bystanders. So you look at that. Drugs are a big part of our shootings, especially territory. If you sell into my territory, there's a price to pay. So that is it. But retaliation is real big here. And but I tell you this, even with all the violence that's in our city, we have a pretty successful arrest rate when it comes to homicide. I think we're up somewhere around 46%, which is really good. But this violence, who knows? Is it COVID? Is it the fact that folks are living on top of each other that don't have anything, and dealing with trauma and anger and frustration? That's another contributing factor. But the bigger question is, how are the guns getting into our community? So here's an example. The young lady on the west side that was shot last weekend, the cadet, Cincinnati police cadet. I'm sure y'all heard the story. Well, the guy she was with was going to sell a gun to a 16-year-old. So, and I think he was 17 or 18. How someone that young have access to a gun to go sell it to someone else? So that's the bigger issue, is how are guns getting into these communities, and how are they getting into, come on, we were all young at one time. And the decisions we made when we were young, we would not make now.
That's right.
And when you put those guns in young folks' heads who don't understand the value of life, don't understand the consequences of that action by pulling that trigger, it's a big reason why we have what we have going on today across the nation.
From a community standpoint,
okay,
who are we needing to hold accountable? Is it the chief? Is it the FOP? Is it the union? Is it we're focused so much on the police officer that we see pulling the trigger in a particular situation, but you're highlighting for us that there's an entire system that's happening. Is it the mayor? Is it the council people? What do we do?
If I knew, I'd probably be on CNN answering that question.
That's your next level. That's the next step.
Sadell, I think unions are a big part of the problem. Let me say this. So I'm a union guy. I believe in unions because I believe unions bring fair wages. They allow employees to get health benefits and other some fringe benefits that come from unions negotiating contracts. But the union also sometimes need to say when wrong is wrong, and you don't get that. And so what does that create? That creates an atmosphere where number one, citizens don't trust the police. They definitely don't trust the union. And then they begin to put the onus on the police chief or the mayor or council. But I think you have to look at all of those. But we rarely look at the unions. We rarely look at them. We rarely look at the FOP presidents that get on TV and justify bad shootings. And they, here's the thing: it's very hard to hold folks like that accountable. It really is. Union presidents
who can the mayor?
Pardon me?
Can who can? Somebody has to be able to. Can the mayor?
They have immunity because they are union presidents. They can say things that no one else can say in law enforcement and get away with it. We have one on here in Cincinnati, and Dan Hills. He says some very, very, very horrible things, and he said he's allowed some racist statements on his Facebook page and the things of that nature. And we tried to deal with it, and that's what we were told. We actually saw it in black and white. So
somebody named Ron said that it's the parents. Somebody named Ron said it's the parents.
Well, parents are a big part of it, but see, when we start doing that, I always deal with onions. That's another onion that we have to unpeel because the family structure. There's no family structure today, and there's a lot of reasons why. But there are no male figures, not just fathers in the home, but there are no male figures to help build those families up. And there are a lot of factors. Mass incarceration is a big one of them. The fact that if you have a felony, you can't get a job, and I can't get a job, so I might as well go back and sling some dope again. I can't get a job. I can't get a job with a livable wage. I can't get a job with benefits. I can't get a job to feed my children. So there are a lot of factors, but the family structure is important. But here's the thing. You have mostly females raising our kids today. And a woman can only take a young boy so far. Once he gets 12, 13, there's not a lot she can do with him. And that's where the male has to come in. And it can come in through the father. It can come in through uncles. It can come in through football coaches and teachers. But that's where the male has to come in. It has to be someone that's in that young man's life, most of his life until he reaches 19, 20, 21 years of age. And right now we don't have that.
And I want to commend you because in addition to all these other wonderful things that you've done, you've also been a foster parent.
Yeah.
So you are aware of, what not having that family system does and what having a surrogate family system of that type does as well.
It's huge, and you're absolutely correct, Sadell. We did foster care for 10 years, and my wife and I made a conscious decision to foster teenage boys, which are the toughest group to foster. And I would say we had some failures, but we had some great successes too. And we stay in touch with several of them, even right now today. And I am Papa, and Crystal is Mama.
So
yes.
Let's go back to June for a second. You all received $10.75 million for community policing. How is that going to be utilized, and what can we expect to see as citizens in the community to enhance our policing situation with our communities?
That's above my pay grade. I don't know how that money is going to be spent. I would just tell you this is that community policing is a big part of what we believe as a department. I work in the community relations unit, and I am the faith-based community officer for the police department. We have an immigrations liaison. We have an LGBTQ liaison. We have a homeless and human trafficking liaison. and we're soon to get a volunteer liaison to really engage the community. Every district has a neighborhood unit, which is made up of 5 to 6 officers who work in the neighborhoods that they're assigned to deal with small issues like noise complaints, um, neighbors disputes, prostitution that might be going on in a particular community. And it's not that they look to arrest the prostitutes. They work with organizations to try and get the prostitutes help. So those things we will continue to build on as a police department. What they're going to do with 10 million for community policing, I know the what is it, the community policing partnering center is also huge, and that's who SERV is under now. And they make great efforts to engage the community and engage the community. Let me say this to you: there are other organizations that have made commitments. So this coming Friday, there's a resource fair that's going to be held down at City West, down in the West End, to offer jobs, childcare through preschool promise, voting registration. Community Action Agency will be there, where they will offer preschool. They offer opportunities to get your CDL. They offer opportunities to get a trade, and they're coming together as a unit. And this is their SAC. They did an event last Thursday, and I'm saying this to say that not only do the police have a part to play, but the community has a part to play, and the community needs to engage the community. And that's starting to happen. So where that 10 million is going, I'm not sure, but I will say this, people cry about defunding the police. 90% of our budget is personnel, and the rest is for equipment and training and things of that nature. So when you talk about defunding the police, you're talking about reducing the number of police officers on the street. And that's the last thing you want to happen.
Well, that was good information.
Pardon me?
I said that was good information. We did not know that.
Yeah, because guess what? The dope boys, the thugs, when they hear defunding, they like, yeah, go ahead. Less cops on the street. Meaning I can get busy even more.
I heard a statistic that said that police are only arresting or active in only 18% of the crimes in the country. So that vast majority are not even being seen or known, or is that a correct stat?
I don't know. Okay. But what you have to realize is that policing, we respond to crime.
Right.
There's and the only way you can prevent crime is to be able to be a prophet and be able to see it before it happens. Right. So we're reactionary, but the other part to that is even when we respond to crime, if we can point folks in the right direction to get assistance once they get out of jail. One example is that we partner with the Hamilton County Office of Reentry. Have you heard of them? So we partner with them. We go into the Justice Center, myself and another officer from our unit, and we spend time talking to the men that are soon to be released back on the street. We do that, and then they assist with driver's license, food stamps, employment, and they really push to get livable wages for those who come into their office that need help. So that's another thing that we're doing as a police department that people really don't know about. Let me say this too. So when we talk about mental illness, we are in partnership with the University of Cincinnati. You aware of that, Sadell?
No.
I see you shaking your head. So we're in partnership.
A lot of mental illness down in Over the Rhine. There's a lot of mental illness where our church is.
I know there is. So we partner with UC in their mental health department, and we have 3 units, and they're called MCT1, MCT2, MCC1, MCT3, and MCT5, and they are mental response teams. They respond with the police to a lot of the mental illness runs, and oftentimes they know the individuals when they get there, and they're able to offer the aid. We respond oftentimes through our training. We get a lot of training on mental illness and how to talk to mentally ill people. And one of the things that we find out oftentimes when we go on a mental illness run is that they're out of medication and they simply want a ride to the hospital to get their medication. So we provide that ride. So, you know, there's services that we do as a police department. That's why I say I can only speak for Cincinnati. And are we perfect? No. Do we have struggles? Yes. But we've come a long way. Go ahead.
They have a neighborhood block. Can you talk about the relationship between the neighborhood block watches and the police? When information is given to police about gun violence incidents in their community, how do we know that the police are following up with it from an accountability standpoint?
So we call them, we have a group that works directly with us. They're called Citizens on Patrol. They wear blue jackets, blue shirts, blue baseball caps. And they're the eyes and ears oftentimes in the community. They will report things. We have now in Cincinnati what's called Shot Spotter. Have you guys heard of Shot Spotter?
No.
So
No.
if there are gunshots, say gunshots go off in College Hill. I don't know if we have a Shot Spotter in College Hill. Better example, Avondale.
Okay.
Shot Spotter can get a close proximity to where those shots happened at. And oftentimes we'll respond in a timely manner to save lives. Oftentimes the perpetrators might be gone, but oftentimes we save the victims. And what it does, it just tracks the shots that are fired and how many are fired and where they're located. And that's a tool that we use that has really been helpful. And I even have it on my phone. So if I'm at home and Shot Spotter goes off on my phone, it tells me where the shots are coming from. So what was your question again, Sadell? I forgot.
Talking about the neighborhood block watches.
Okay, so Citizens on Patrol. So when complaints come into us, we follow up with complaints. So say that there's drug dealing going on. Then what we do, we send in one of our vice units who are undercover, and they do a surveillance. They just watch and obtain information. And the other thing that is an old-fashioned way and it still works is informants. You use informants too. It's still used and it still works.
What about the snitch culture?
The snitch what?
Culture, the culture, we're against.
And this is what I always tell young people when I go speak to young people. When they get in that cruiser with those handcuffs on, and we take them to whichever district they're going to be interrogated, and they sit in that room, they would tell on their mama, their daddy, their sister, their grandmother. That snitching is only in the community. When they start looking at, man, I might go to jail for 5 years, and you can knock 3 years off. Let me give you some info. How you think we're solving so many crimes? It's not that we're brilliant. It's that folks tell.
Yeah.
So that snitches get stitches is folks tell, y'all. I'm just saying.
Okay. Is there a Shot Spotter in OTR?
Yes. Yes. OTR, West End. I know that there's one in Avondale. Me and my wife were somewhere and I saw one. I said, why is it one out here? Where were we? I can't remember where we were at. I found that it was College Hill. So yeah, and they're expensive. They're purchased through grants, but yeah, they're putting them up eventually all over the city.
So what other ways could the community be of service to help CPD in its battle against crime and just safety as a whole?
One is see something, say something. The other thing I think we really need to embrace young people. We need to get out in the streets, walk the streets, talk to young people, talk to them about having hope. Here's the thing, and me and Krista talk about this all the time. The one of the biggest problems in the poor communities today, because I don't want to keep saying black community because you got poor white folk too, is that exposure. So if you've never seen a doctor, never seen a lawyer, never seen a teacher, all you've ever seen is drug dealers and police. What do you have to draw on as you get older to say that's what I want to do? And so how does that happen? We who have those positions, we get out in the community and we engage the community. We do block parties. The community throws a block party, and you have folks, professional folk there who can talk to young people. Community has a big part to play in this, and I think the community looks to the police too much. And the community needs to be looking to the community to help change some of the stuff.
Now, when you talk about internally, we heard this thing about a blue shield.
Okay. My shield is not blue. My shield is not blue.
So there's this idea that the police are always going to protect each other. There's a fraternal order, and I think one person's question was, when things go down like this, is there any kind of internal checks and balances, accountability? Where is the voice of change from within the department? Does it exist?
You see me laughing, right? You see me laughing, right?
I know what you do, but I'm just,
Let me tell you. So if you and I are partners, Sadell, and this is my profession, this is how I provide for my family, and you do something horrendous, I'm telling on you.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell the truth, and that's the mentality of the officers I work with. If you're doing something that's right, I got your back 100%. But if you're doing something that's wrong, I can't have your back because I can't jeopardize my career for you. And that's the mentality of most of the cops I work with. We say, go ahead.
There seem to have been some reports internally in Cincinnati that there were some racial issues inside of the Cincinnati Police Department. Is that still an accuracy?
There's racism everywhere, Sadell.
I know.
There's racism in the world, so it don't stop when you enter the doors of the police department. I would say this: our chief has done some training on biases. I really would like to get Sherman in there. I really would. On some biases. We've done training. Fred Gilmer, who's a police officer, created a program, and it's called Empathy through American History. And he goes through the history of America as it relates to Black folk, so that white officers could gain empathy and treat Black folk who they don't understand differently. So we had that, and then the one on bias was actually mandated by the state of Ohio. It was called implicit and explicit biases. Excuse me. And the last one we just had was a training dealing with biases, and it wasn't bad. And all these classes are taught by officers that these other officers know. So I say that's a beginning. I think that we need to have serious conversation internally, if it's one-on-one, if it's in a group, and sit down and talk about race. I've said it several times. Me as the Sentinel president, I really want to I was working on putting something together until COVID hit, where we were looking for a safe place, and we were looking for a moderator, and Black and white cops get in a room and talk about race. And until we start doing that, now look, policing has been a racist profession since the slave catching days. And yes, I would say it's gotten better, but we still have a ways to go. And the reason it's gotten better because you're getting these younger officers coming in that are not operating that way.
Yeah.
Some. Okay, some, not all, but some. And that's helping change that culture. It really is. So that's what I think needs to happen. But racism exists in policing. Racism exists in the Cincinnati Police Department. I mean, come on. It exists in Cincinnati, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have Joe. We have a question here that says, I've heard that communities of color are disproportionately policed for minor drug crimes as opposed to white communities. As a Black police officer, can you share your thoughts on this?
Let me see. So I've made plenty of drug arrests, but I've arrested Black and white. in doing my job. And I would say I believe the black community is policed disproportionately. I truly believe that. I believe that traffic stops happen more often to blacks, um, as opposed to, say, West End as opposed to Hyde Park, Avondale as opposed to Central Business District. I think there's a disparity there when it comes to how blacks are treated as opposed to white. That, to me, that's an extension of racism. That's also an extension of biases that officers carry that they sometimes don't realize they carry. I know Sherman said ignorance is not an excuse, but sometimes they don't know because they've never had to deal with black folk before. And now I have to deal with someone I don't even understand. Why are you talking so loud? There's a group of black guys on the corner fighting and you pull up and they just having a loud conversation.
Right.
That's not understanding the culture. So I hope that answered the question.
It did.
Sherman,
So
you grinning. What you thinking?
There's willful ignorance too. And so,
yeah, I agree.
This is where you grow up in a place where there are no minorities, and you bought into everything that you saw in the idiot box.
Yeah.
But there are times where you're just avoiding truth.
I agree.
You want the exposure, but you engage in a demographic unlike your own, and you're treating them in ways that are just not. There's the willful ignorance.
Willful ignorance. I like that.
One of the criticisms to Sherman's point that I've heard historically, I'm obviously from Philadelphia. Well, obviously, I'm from Philadelphia, and so I haven't been here since I was a child. But that most of the policemen and women were coming from particular neighborhoods within Cincinnati, and those particular neighborhoods may not have been diverse neighborhoods, and it became a culture that was representative of those neighborhoods. How true was that? Is that still true now?
I would say this to you. That was true. And to a certain extent, it might be true now, but not as much. There was a time when I came on the department, 65 of the cops on the department came from the West Side. Okay. And most of them came from Elder High School. That's still there, but I would say not as much. Here's what I offer. And it saddens me that we're not doing it. We need black men and women to become police officers. We keep crying about change. Well, why don't you come in and be a change agent? Stop standing on the outside complaining, take the test, go through the academy, and become a police officer. Go up through the ranks where you can get in decision-making positions and then be the change maker. Or put yourself in positions where you can influence those changes. Stop complaining. I would love for us to have a class of 40 and have 20 are black men and women. I would love for that to happen, but we don't apply. We keep complaining about the man, but we won't get in to bring changes to a system that we complain about. That makes no sense to me. I have nephews I tried to get to become police officers. My next door neighbors in there, I don't want to be the police. Why not? Here's what I lay out. On average, you make about $80,000 a year. It's 95% boredom and 5% off the chain. Most of the time, I'm just keeping it real. Most of the time you're going to these runs, it's a neighbor arguing with another neighbor, or the daughter done got in a fight with the mother. I mean, those are serious issues, but the violence rarely happens. Most cops on the job have never shot their gun on duty. But here we have white officers that have been policemen for 3 and 4 generations, sending their kids to private schools, buying homes in the suburbs, driving nice cars, getting a car every 4 and 5 years, money in the bank, a nice retirement, a great pension. And we need to begin to look at that. I mean, as African American, as black folk, and I wish I could get young folk to even being firefighters. I can't get young folks to be firefighters. And firefighters, just like police, are dying for blacks right now. If you apply and you have a clean background, you will get in the academy. You would,
Wow.
they've even lessened the amount of when you have smoked weed. It used to be if you smoke weed within a year, you couldn't be a cop. But now they're saying something like 6 weeks. If you haven't smoked in 6 weeks, and we still
Wow.
can't get our young brothers and sisters to apply, to come in and bring about the change.
And that would
Stop.
hold true for prosecutors,
Yes,
magistrates,
yes.
corrections, all these other places that are the pipeline of the system.
Let me say something to you. The judicial system is not broken. It's doing what it was intended to do. We have to get in and change it.
Now, when you look at a situation like Atlanta, where the police officers were Black as well, is that a matter of training? What is that a matter of, in your opinion?
Remind me of Atlanta. I thought that was where the young man was in the parking lot.
They were pulling them out of the car, and there was one in the parking lot where the person got shot, and there was another one where there was African officers and pulling people out of the car. And that.
Well, I don't know what happened in Atlanta. I can't speak to that one. Give me a little more background.
I can't remember all the background because I'm having a some black police officers are shooting unarmed Black men as well. The problem is
well, that may be true, but that's rare. It's rare.
Yeah. Sometimes
it
it's
really
crazy.
is. You know what my greatest weapon is when I'm out on the job?
What's that?
My mouth.
My
mouth. Being able to talk to people. You have to be able to talk. I can't go into someone's home because I'm on a run and start yelling at them. The husband, he gonna look at me like I'm 10 karat gold crazy. I have to go in there and be able to communicate. And if you yelling and screaming because you caught up in some emotion, I'm gonna let you yell and scream. And then I'm gonna say, well, it looks like you don't need me, so let me go. And then, oh, I'm sorry, officer. Yeah, we do need you, but I allowed them to get that out. You got to allow that. You can't come in commanding because you think you're in charge.
Which makes us go back to the situation in Wisconsin where Mr. Baker was breaking up a domestic fight between 2 women. Right. And then got a situation and ended up, being shot 7 times in the back. And, some of this, you're talking about this cultural awareness or cultural understanding and being able to diffuse situations as they come, and then not having this general fear of African males or of conflict, being able to de-escalate it.
Where does that fear come from?
That's what I was about to ask you.
Sadell and Sherman, that fear comes from several places. The environment you're raised in, the media and what you see on TV and how Black men are always portrayed, and any other stories that's been told around the dinner table or in the living room as you sit and listen to your uncles and aunts and your grandparents and your parents talk about Black folk. And so that fear is developed because things we don't understand, we oftentimes fear. And this is what I tell my pastor all the time, who's white. I said, we understand you all are way more than you understand us, because we don't have a choice as to whether we deal with white folk or not. Well, white folk have a choice as to whether they deal with Black folk or not. So by not having those experiences and that exposure, you don't even understand who I am, how I think, or even sometimes the things I may say. And that's because, go ahead.
The also thing is, when we were growing back up in the olden days, we were taught that the police officer is your friend. Yeah. That if you're in trouble or you need advice or you need directions somewhere, or that you should engage a police officer. Yep. Now our children and our grandchildren are being taught that the police are someone to be feared, at least in our community. Yeah. So, and they are our enemy. So I don't want to be one. I'm not going to be, you know, a little kid that's getting, you know, their hand shaken by one and getting a popsicle in the corner, you know. And so how do we find the right police officers, change the perception of the children and the parents in the community to want to become police officers, or to even, you know, if you had a percentage, you know, maybe 90% of the police officers are great and there's a few bad apples, but now I've painted a broad brush and now I and my children and grandchildren won't even approach a police officer.
Well, I'll tell you this, the way you combat that is when you see kids out, you greet kids and you show them that you're friendly. Here's the thing that we run into oftentimes. Kids will be with their parents and the parents are like, he's been bad. Can you take him to jail? And this is what we tell, this is what I've done, and I know other officers have done it. We tell that parent, don't do that. Don't put fear in him when it comes to police officers, because if he ever gets in trouble and needs the police, we would be the last ones he run to because you put fear in him. Mm-hmm. And we lecture the parents on that. Here's the other thing too, Sadell, is that the history of policing and the brutality that's been put on Black people by police throughout history. I still go back to this. How do you change that? You become one.
That's right.
You become one. So,
and again, you know, you have the volunteer pieces and you have community activism parts that can understand the system enough to articulate it to people and be a bridge. We need bridge builders too, for those who may not have the capability or the disposition to be a police officer, but we need them to be community liaisons. We need them to be able to have the voice of both sides and be mediators in this challenge to bring together what ultimately comes from correct community policing, and that's, you know, community. It's actually coming together, being unified, and decreasing not only crime but living harmoniously amongst one another.
Yeah, I agree.
So now, as we're in this situation, all these things are happening. You know, as we're just regular citizens, you know, there are many people who are now talking about, you know, acquiring guns or protecting their homes or any of those kinds of things. When police officers are recommending things to the community at large, what are your thoughts about, you know, we've seen places where, you know, people are beginning to get into, you know, being armed for, you know, the protection of their homes. What are your thoughts there?
You better protect your home. I think that, you know, what's really interesting is that before I became a cop, I didn't believe in guns. But once I became a cop and the things that I've seen and things I've heard and how I've been threatened and things of that nature, I would not be in my home without some type of a weapon, some type of a firearm. I tell people all the time, you need to have at least a home defense weapon. And that's a good shotgun. That's probably the best home defense weapon you can buy because it operates in close range. And you don't have to, all you have to do is point and shoot. And you're going to hit your target. I encourage folks to have home defense. I also encourage people to get their CCW license. Be responsible. Be a responsible citizen and own a firearm. You don't have to. No one ever has to know that you have a weapon in your home, but I always suggest that you have a weapon in your home. I always do, and just learn. Here's the thing that we do in our community. We have, number one, we have a fear of guns. And number two, we don't teach gun safety in our homes. So once you learn gun safety and you begin to handle a gun, then you lose the fear of guns, but you respect guns.
Yeah.
Like I told you before, a gun doesn't go off by itself. You have to pull a trigger. And you can always tell an untrained person, because the first thing they would do when they put a gun in their hands is put their finger on the trigger. And that should be the last thing you do. So gun safety is important, respecting a firearm, and then also training, going to the range and shooting. You know, I have a membership. I shoot at the police range, but I have a membership at a private range also. and I go shoot.
Yeah, we got to go together one day.
Oh, you want to go? I think I can take you out as a guest. You have a gun, Sherman?
Well,
We'll talk about that later.
now, look, here's your last question. You trying to blow us up here. How does your faith engage with your role or your various roles as a police officer now? How would you connect those two?
That's a good question. So for me, because you see so much as a police officer and your heart can become very hard. It really can. I'll tell you this story and I'll continue to answer that question. So there was an accident. Guy was on a motorcycle and he crashed, and it was a pretty bad accident. So I had to follow him up to the hospital. You do that, and if they're still alive, because if they do end up dying, you have to call your supervisor and go through that, get the coroner there and those things. So the guy's laying in the emergency room at UC, and they have him in one of the rooms where they work on you. Not one of those rooms where you're kind of being held, but they can do surgery in this room. And this guy's bleeding out of his nose, out of his mouth, out of his ears. And I'm looking at him like, man, I'm hungry. It didn't affect me. So I began to pray. And I said, God, I need you to keep my heart pliable. I need you to keep me operating out of empathy and sympathy and compassion to everyone I deal with. And so through that, God did keep my heart soft so that I could see human beings and not see a radio runner. And so because of my faith, I go on some radio runs, and I might stay there 30 minutes lecturing a child who's had a dispute with his mother and tell him the importance of his mother. I never have to go back to that house again. So my faith is very important in what I do, because without my faith, my heart would be very hard. I never forget when I first got on the job, and my wife kept saying, "You're changing." I'm like, I'm not changing, but I was. I couldn't see it, but she could. And so we pray all the time that God keeps my heart where it's at, no matter what I see, no matter what I have to deal with, because you can get jaded out there. I mean, you can get jaded quickly if you go into the same house over and over every other day. You go in, it's a domestic dispute every other day. You can become jaded, and you begin to say things like those people, and I don't want to ever get there. And whenever I talk to young officers, that's what I tell them, is that you treat people how you would treat your mother, not how you want to be treated, but how you would treat your mother. So,
one quick question. Once the person said, he said it's good to have a gun in your home, but what about when you're out and about concealing carry?
Get your CCW. I carry everywhere because I'm a police officer, number one. The second reason is that I don't want something to happen and I can't defend my wife.
You saw that face, right? Remember that face when I come calling you up when you start heading to the range.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We can make it a double date.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah. Crystal, she has a CCW, but I haven't gotten her a gun yet. I need to get her a gun.
There it is.
All right.
Thank you so much, Louis, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
And your knowledge.
Appreciate it.
Again, and I'm going to take you up on that offer too. But
okay.
Thanks again for this. And to our Facebook family, we thank you for joining another edition of Tuesday Table Talks. Again, we are your hosts, Pastor Sherman and Sadell. This has been The Warehouse,
where transformation begins, and we have Bible study tomorrow at 7 p.m. on the same channel. And mark your calendars, because on the 20th of September, we will have worship in Washington Park at noon. Washington Park, 12 noon on the 20th of September. We want everybody to join us. There'll be some good gospel music that y'all love.
Yes.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks a lot.
So be safe.
Hey,
Have a great evening. Louis, we love you.
Love you, Sherman.